Hello, my name is Henry Boyd Jenkins. I have a diagnosis of schizophrenia.
I had depression. I had a miserable, horrible life for many years.
I also happen to have been diagnosed bipolar 1 disorder.
I'm also someone who suffers from chronic schizophrenia.
I suffered from borderline personality disorder.
Major depression and anxiety.
I live with bipolar disorder.
Stigma derives from the Greek root, and it really means mark. It's interesting because stigma is really a noun. But we use stigma almost as a verb now because it's not, the mark. As a matter of fact, most people with mental illness, you can't actually see that they have a mental illness. So there is no real mark. But it's not the mark. It's actually what we do when we find that that person is marked, how we avoid them, how we try and be not around them, how we maybe even mistreat them.
Because very few people that I knew, I wasn't sent a lot of cards or flowers. I mean, if I had had a broken leg or I was with a child, I would have been inundated. But all I got was a couple phone calls telling me to perk up. Perk up. Because I didn't think of that. So here's my question. My question is, how come when people have mental damage, it's always an act of imagination? How come every other organ in your body can get sick and you get sympathy except the brain?
People who have a mental illness are excluded and treated unfairly. And this is because people are afraid of mental illness.
In the long run, stigma produces a kind of isolation that grows from fear.
The list of mistreatment of people with mental illness is very long. Certainly up until the 17th or 18th century, they were simply locked away, or if you had someone like this in the family, you would keep them concealed because there was a tremendous stigma to having the touch of insanity in your family.
Well, when you think about the history of the treatment of mental illness, we have come a long, long way in a matter of several decades. There was a time, and it hasn't been that long ago, when the treatment of mental illness consisted of locking someone in an institution, locking them in a hospital. An act of violence that involves someone with a mental illness, that gets an unbelievable amount of media attention for days and days and days. And so because there is so much focus on that, it appears to the public, or they can draw the conclusion from that, oh my goodness, all these mentally ill people running around out there must all be violent.
Every life is touched by mental illness.
It doesn't matter if you're black, you're white, you're a man, you're a woman, you're young, you're old. It affects all of us.
In very personal ways. Stigma sucks.
Stigma has impacted my own confidence.
I just thought I was abandoned, ignored by people. I've come to learn that it's a very common occurrence with people with mental illness.
The stigma, the version of what it is to be mentally ill, has cost me 2 of my siblings out of 3.
It's woven into the fabric of our society, and it stems back centuries, really, when mental illness was considered a character flaw.
Silence helps perpetuate the stigma surrounding mental health and suicide.
The conversation simply needs to start.
When we just open up the conversation and begin speaking about it, it's amazing what can happen.
It's okay to talk about it.
Talk to others.
Talk about these things.
Talk out loud without fear.
Because as long as stigma exists, it prevents the society as a whole from incorporating these illnesses into a dialogue.